A lot changed during the 20th century. Advancements in technology enabled dramatic improvements in terms of the speed, cost, and quality of business and government operations. Portions of Minnesota's election system took advantage of these technological developments, including how voter registration records were stored and how ballots were tabulated. However, much of today's election system still remains unchanged from the time of the early 20th century. A 21st century voter ID bill has been introduced in the Minnesota State Legislature. The objective of this bill is to modernize our election system in order to improve the integrity, efficiency, and effectiveness of Minnesota's elections. Let's take a moment and compare today's election system to some of the changes proposed in the 21st century voter ID bill. Today, when a voter enters a polling place, they are typically directed to one of two different queues, one for pre-registered voters and one for unregistered voters who wish to register to vote on Election Day. Unregistered voters must wait in line to fill out a voter registration form. During busy periods, a person may need to wait 30 minutes or more to complete a voter registration. Election judges routinely report instances of people becoming frustrated with the wait times and leaving the polling place without voting. Voters registering on Election Day must use one of three methods to confirm their identity and their address. First, they may present an approved form of photo identification. Second, they may provide a recent utility bill that includes their current address. Or third, they may have a registered voter from the precinct accompany them to vouch for their identity and their residence. Individuals who lack one of these three forms of identification are turned away from voting. This approach to identity verification has some problems. In vouching, for example, one person can vouch for up to 15 people in a single election. Poll watchers routinely report stories of individuals attempting to vouch for multiple individuals who they apparently don't even know. There have also been reports of individuals attempting to use forged utility bills in order to register to vote. After the election, handwritten voter registration forms must be data entered into the statewide voter registration system, or SVRS. State and federal law requires that these new registrations be immediately entered. However, some counties are consistently late in meeting these statutory deadlines, often requiring 6 months or more to complete the data entry. After the registration forms have been entered into SVRS, a postal verification card, or PVC, is printed and mailed to every newly registered voter as a means of verifying their identity and their address. In a typical statewide election, upwards of 500,000 PVCs are printed and mailed. If these cards were piled on top of one another, the stack would be taller than a 30-story office building. If a postal verification card is not returned as undeliverable by the Postal Service, the newly registered voter is deemed to be valid. Return cards must be data entered so that the voter's registration can be flagged and challenged in the next election. Now keep in mind that this verification step is not completed until several weeks after the election has already taken place and the individual's ballot has been cast and counted. In 2008, there were over 23,000 postal verification cards from Election Day registrations that were returned as undeliverable by the Postal Service. Including the return cards from pre-election registrants, the number increases to over 32,000 undeliverable cards. A sampling of these return cards reveal voter registration addresses that include sections of freeway, empty lots, city parks, business warehouses, and non-existent house numbers. Keep in mind that this occurred in a year in which several major election battles were decided by just a few hundred votes. One other point to keep in mind is that there's currently no eligibility verification performed for voters who register to vote on Election Day. Individuals may be ineligible to vote for a variety of reasons, including felons who are still on parole, non-citizens, individuals who are under guardianship, or out-of-state residents. A review of 2008 election records revealed thousands of ineligible voters that may have participated in the 2008 election. It took nearly 2 years for these persons to be identified, and keep in mind again that these individuals' ballots had already been cast and counted. Now let's go back and look at the Election Day process for pre-registered voters. Voters who enter the polling place line up by last name at the check-in table. Each voter signs in on an election roster. The roster is a list of all registered voters in the precinct. The list includes the person's name, address, and provides a place for the voter to sign in. Pre-registered voters are not currently required to present any form of identification. In today's system, a dishonest individual could travel from one precinct to another and sign in on any random line in an election roster, thereby voting multiple times in a single election. After the election officials scan a barcode next to the names of persons who have signed in on the roster, recording the fact that they voted in the election. This information is captured within the statewide voter registration system. Past experience has shown that election officials can make mistakes by scanning the wrong lines on the roster. This has resulted in people being recorded as having voted when they actually did not, including deceased individuals. Mistakes such as these not only impact the integrity of our election records, but also can adversely impact whether a voter registration continues to remain on the rolls. Now let's compare today's election system to the proposed changes included in the 21st Century Voter ID Bill. Let's begin with the Election Day registration process. New registrants will present their driver's license or state-issued identification card. The card will be swiped in a card reader. Information from the card will be electronically captured, and the voter's eligibility to vote will be immediately verified. The system will also automatically confirm that the individual is in the correct polling place. If not, it will print a map and directions to the appropriate polling place where the individual should vote. Data from the individual's identification card will automatically populate a voter registration form that is then printed and signed by the voter. The voter's registration information will be stored in the electronic poll book and uploaded to the SVRS system later that day. If an individual lacks an identification card, they will still be allowed to vote using a provisional ballot. No one will be turned away from the polls, which is currently the case for individuals who lack the appropriate form of identification. Individuals who use a provisional ballot to vote will be required to return to their local city or county office within 10 days after the election to confirm their identity and eligibility with a proper form of identification. The long lines of people waiting to manually complete a voter registration form will be a thing of the past. People who wish to register on Election Day will no longer simply give up on voting due to wait times. Since new voter registrations are electronically transferred to SVRS on Election Day, election workers will no longer need to spend hundreds of hours after the election to manually enter handwritten voter registration forms into SVRS. This will not only reduce errors, but also enable officials to comply with existing laws requiring the timely entry of new voter registrations. Gone, too, is the requirement for counties to print and mail postal verification cards to newly registered voters. The voter's identity and residence will be confirmed before they are given a ballot instead of after the fact. Now let's examine the process for registered voters. Individuals will present their driver's license or state identification card to an election official when checking in to vote. The election official will swipe the individual's card. The system will then automatically check to confirm the voter's eligibility to vote and record the fact that the person has voted. The voter's information will be automatically transferred to SVRS. All of this will occur in a matter of seconds. Gone is the need to print thousands of paper roster pages prior to Election Day. Gone is the need for voters to page through a paper roster looking for the appropriate line on which to sign in. Gone is the chance that someone could vote under another person's identity. Gone is the opportunity for someone to vote when they are ineligible to do so. And gone is the need for election officials to scan rosters after the election in order to record that the individuals had voted. Let's recap the major benefits of the 21st Century Voter ID proposal. First, the proposal improves the integrity of our elections by verifying each voter's identity and eligibility before they are given a ballot, not after the fact. Second, the new system eliminates millions of dollars in wasteful government spending by eliminating the printing of tens of thousands of pages of election rosters, the data entry of 500,000 voter registration forms, the printing and mailing of hundreds of thousands of postal verification cards, and the scanning of thousands of pages of election rosters. Third, it speeds up the voting process, thereby eliminating the possibility for people to become disenfranchised and give up in trying to vote due to long lines. Fourth, the proposal improves the timeliness and accuracy of information used to administer our elections due to the elimination of manual data entry. Fifth, the new system eliminates the possibility of a voter being turned away from the polls due to the lack of the appropriate credentials through the use of provisional ballots. Finally, and possibly most important, the proposal improves the public confidence in our election systems. States that have implemented similar systems have seen an increase in their voter participation. Minnesota is one of the few states that allow for Election Day voter registration. Most other states require individuals to register at least 20 days in advance of an election so that the voter's identity and eligibility can be verified prior to them voting. Today, Minnesotans who register prior to Election Day are subject to a variety of eligibility verifications before they vote. However, Election Day registrants are not subject to these same verification checks until after their ballot has been cast and counted. Post-election research has revealed that many of the ineligible voters detected as having voted in our elections are the result of Election Day registrations. Minnesota's current approach to voter registration is fundamentally unjust because it treats two different groups of voters very differently. It also is unsecure because there is no eligibility verification being done for Election Day registrants. Minnesotans' sense of fairness demands that this situation must be addressed. A recent poll reveals that 87% of Minnesotans believe that all newly registered voters should be subject to the same identity and eligibility verifications. The 21st Century Voter ID proposal solves this problem by employing real-time eligibility verifications for Election Day registrants. If this proposal is not adopted, the only alternative approach to correcting this injustice is to join with the majority of states that prohibit Election Day registration. 21st Century Voter ID is a proposal whose time has come to Minnesota. Please contact your elected officials and urge them to support this bill.